Returning to U.S. history, for this video I will be covering James Madison, often considered the father of the Constitution and the fourth President of the United States. On March 16, 1751, in Port Conway, Virginia, James Madison was born to James Madison Sr. and Nellie Conway Madison. He had another 11 younger siblings and was raised on the family plantation, Montpelier, located in Orange County, Virginia. From the ages of 11 to 16, he was taught various subjects, one of those being Latin. This led to him to find an interest in philosophy which shaped his political beliefs. He went on to attend the College of New Jersey, now known as Princeton University. While there, he wrote poetry, such as a poem where one of his rivals meets the Greek god Apollo and gets beat up. That's not a joke. He graduated in 1771, becoming one of the first graduate students from that school. After returning home, Madison decided to get involved in local politics. He served as a member of the Orange County Committee of Public Safety in 1774, later going on to get elected to the Virginia legislature in 1776. Around this time, he became friends with Thomas Jefferson, a fellow Virginiaman. James Madison was well known for fighting for religious freedom, fighting to put religious rights as a natural right in the Virginia Declaration of Rights. His vision was realized when the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom was released. James Madison was chosen to represent Virginia in the Continental Congress in 1780. He left and returned to Virginia in 1783, but was sent back because of the weaknesses of the Articles of the Confederation and the need for a new constitution. After studying various governments from throughout the world, James Madison determined that the United States needed a strong federal government. Madison proposed the Virginia Plan, a plan which separated the government into three branches with a series of checks and balances so no branch grew too powerful. He also suggested that state governors and judges had more power to manage their states alongside the state legislators. James Madison's Virginia plan also would see the creation of a legislative branch with two houses, the House of Representatives and the Senate. The House of Representatives was meant to be elected by the people, whilst the Senate was supposed to be elected by a group of electors to prevent mob rule. His plan also proposed a national executive who would rule for, at that time, an undetermined amount of years for every term. Figures such as Alexander Hamilton proposed having this national executive rule for life, being essentially an elective monarchy. And yes, elective monarchies are a real thing. Poland used to be one. However, the Founding Fathers eventually decided that this national executive, which later became the president, would have a 4-year term, being able to run again if they desired. One of the greatest and most heated debates held in the Continental Congress was over the issue of slavery. Madison proposed a compromise, making it so that one chamber of Congress had representation from every individual in the state, including slaves, whilst the other only had representation from free men. A compromise proposed by James Wilson and Roger Sherman was eventually agreed upon. Although James Madison is considered the father of the Constitution, he stated that the Constitution was not the offspring of a single brain, but the works of many heads. After the Constitution had been written, it needed to be ratified by 9 of the 13 states. To gain support for the Constitution, James Madison, alongside Alexander Hamilton and John Jay, wrote the Federalist Papers. They named it this because people who supported the new Constitution were known as Federalists, while those who were against it were called the Anti-Federalists. In 1787, the Constitutional Convention eventually signed the U.S. Constitution. It was ratified a year later, and it came into function in 1789. In this year, Washington became the U.S. President, and James Madison became a U.S. Representative. While in Congress, he drafted the Bill of Rights, which was ratified in 1791. Despite being a Federalist originally, James Madison and his friend Thomas Jefferson opposed Alexander Hamilton's proposal for a national bank and still believed quite firmly in states' rights. Hamilton went on to create the Federalist Party, and Madison and Jefferson responded with the creation of the Democratic-Republican Party, a short-lived party which eventually split into the Whig and Democratic parties. In 1794, James Madison married Dolly Payne Todd, a Quaker widow who only had one son. They had almost completely polar opposite personalities. While James Madison was a more quiet and reserved individual, Dolly Madison loved to entertain and often hosted receptions and dinner parties. During their marriage, it is believed that they were almost never apart from each other. After Jefferson was elected president, he chose Madison to be his Secretary of State. In this position, James Madison helped acquire the Louisiana Territory from the French Empire, doubling the size of the United States. He also helped enact the Embargo Act with Jefferson, which greatly harmed the American economy and was ended shortly before Jefferson left office. In the election of 1808, James Madison defeated the Federalist Charles Pinckney. The already bad economy was still plummeting, and Britain was still attacking American merchant ships and forcing American sailors to work for them. Alongside that, the British were supporting Tecumseh and his Western Confederacy, which fought against American settlers. Enraged, Madison issued a proclamation of war against Britain. This was a war that America was not prepared for. Congress had not prepared an army, and many state militias refused to join the War of 1812, which they nicknamed Mr. Madison's War. Despite their many disadvantages, America still fought and also lost numerous battles. Madison ran for re-election, winning and defeating DeWitt Clinton, I think I pronounced that right, a Federalist with support from anti-war Democratic Republicans as well as basically everyone who voted Federalist. Although he won the election, Madison faced constant scrutiny for the war. The American economy got even worse as Europe ended trade with the United States. New England even threatened to secede from the Union and form their own nation, which I think would make for a very interesting alternate history scenario. James Madison and his wife had to flee Washington when Britain invaded and torched the White House and the Capitol building. The war eventually, came to an end with the Treaty of Ghent. Before word of the treaty reached America, the Battle of New Orleans was won by Andrew Jackson, turning him into a war hero. Although the war was declared a stalemate, which more accurately was a defeat but we refused to admit it, America did accomplish some victories in the war. As I already mentioned, General Andrew Jackson defeated British forces in New Orleans, giving him tremendous fame. Alongside him, William Henry Harrison had defeated Tecumseh, forcing Amerindians against colonial expansion to stand down. The end of the war led to the era of good feelings, a period where the economy sprung back up, national pride exploded, and the gridlock in Washington died down as the Federalist Party ceased to exist and the Democratic Republicans absorbed many Federalist platforms, such as maintaining the national bank. In 1817, James Madison left office and returned to Montpelier. Despite his, for the lack of a better word, awful presidency, Madison was still hailed for being a national hero and a great thinker for his contributions to the American Constitution. He eventually died on June 28, 1836, as a result of heart failure. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more. Thank you for watching.